I'm gonna go over my New Dawn deck, which if you don't know how New Dawn works, he's basically like an infinite value paragon in the game. So essentially you can pay 3 energy to get out this ship right here, this 0/6 ship, and you can spend 1 energy after that to banish this ship for a turn, and then at the start of your next turn you get it back onto the board. You get a card out of your singularity to your hand, and then you also deal 1 damage to something on your opponent's side of the board. Because New Dawn also has a passive ability that the first time a card leaves your singularity each turn, you deal 1 damage to a random enemy, and you reveal a random enemy bank card. And then he also has another passive effect here that if all enemy bank cards are revealed, then the enemy plays with the top card of their deck revealed, which is interesting. It kind of helps both players out a little bit. But yeah, it's a very strong ability, but it's also very slow. So yeah, he's like the infinite value paragon, and he's just trying to extend the game on for as long as possible, and then you'll eventually whittle your opponent down on resources since you have infinite, and you will win the game. And even like the pings that you get every single turn are pretty effective, but you do have to spend that 1 energy every single turn, so it's like you're playing without 1 energy every single time after you get this New Dawn into play. But yeah, I'm gonna go through the deck. It's the most control-y deck out there. I mean, I did put out a video on an Augen core list that's very control-y as well, that does very well against specifically Catherine, and it kind of does well against this deck as well since we run a lot of spells in here. But maybe I have a little more minion heavy list at the moment to combat the aggressiveness of Catherine. But yeah, I'm gonna get into the list right now. Hope you like it. So going in energy order, we have the Singularity Steward, one of the best cards in the deck. After a unit is banished on your turn, it gains +2/+1, and it's a 0/3, so it's pretty sticky as well for 1 energy. So you want to get this guy down, and then you eventually want to banish some stuff with the cards that I'm going to show you. There's quite a bit of cards that can banish cards, and yeah, this guy can get out of control. If you get multiple down on the board, it could really just snowball and win the game pretty quickly, not gonna lie. And it also does very well into the mirror matchup as well. If one player just gets ahead on the stewards, it's very hard for the other one to come back, and then they never get to use their leader ability, their paragon ability as well. The Engine Whisperer, just a 1 mana 1/2 that makes your effects cost 1 less and just helps you keep the early game board and deal with early game aggression, while maybe pumping out some spells to banish cards to pop up your to get your steward going a little faster. Also just gives you more options and can make up for the 1 energy that you have to pay for your paragon. Next up we have Life Siphon, a basic card again. Deal 2 damage to a target unit. If it destroys it, then you banish it instead. So really good card against decks that are running some small minions at the beginning of the game, which are a lot of decks. Yeah, just an easy way to get your stewards going, but also with this deck you do want to pay attention to what you're actually banishing, because those cards that are in your singularity, when you banish a card, it goes to your singularity, and you can get those cards back later with your paragon. Next up, I have 2 copies of the New Dawn's Venerated Raider, which you could only run this card if you're New Dawn, and it just adds a random corrupted unit from your enemy's parallel to your hand. So something from your opponent's class randomly goes to your hand, and most of the time it's going to be useless, but it's just fodder for your banks. You're usually just going to bank whatever card you get from this, but sometimes it could be useful. The only thing to note is that corrupted actually means that when you play that unit, you actually pay the cost of it, not only with your energy but with your life as well. So if it costs 3, I'm going to be paying 3 life to play it as well as the 3 energy. But this card is just good for like the infinite value kind of game plan, and like I said, just for giving you a card to bank immediately. 2 gunslingers right here, helps you fight on board, curve out pretty well. Yeah. Then last but not least, for the ones, we have the PSA launchers, 3 of them, just to help with that early game, just to really get Catherine off the board and just make sure that you can stick a lot of units and start banishing and survive until the late game, because that's what it's all about. If you survive until the late game, you basically win the game. Going into the 2s, we have 1 collateral damage right here, since the relics are popping up with Kathy, and since a lot of people are playing Stabilized Shard as well to gain that energy. Just 1 of these just in case. Could also help you against the Earthen matchup if they get down one of the Gaia's Calls. Thinking about going into like EMP in this deck. I think EMP is a pretty strong card. I'll show you right here. This one destroys all relics, the other one destroys one relic, but it costs two. Depends on what you're really playing against. I think that EMP Shockwave is very strong, so I would recommend this, honestly, if you have it, but I just don't have the NFT version, so I'm running the other one. But yeah, either one is still feeling pretty good. Next up, we have a Stabilized Shard, one of the best relics in the game at the moment, because not a lot of people are running Relic Hate because of how fast they're trying to go with their deck. So yeah, at the start of your turn, you just gain 1 energy. That's pretty much, it's just a ramp tool, but there is another part to it that could come up sometimes, that at the start of your turn, if it has 8 or more counters, then you can remove all counters to copy the next card you play. When you play this card, you choose a type of card, like unit, relic, whatever. At the end of your turn, it gets a counter if you played that type. So I mean, we have a lot of units. You're usually playing a unit, so you're usually going to get a counter on your turn, and then 8 turns later, you get a copy of whatever the next card you play is if you want, which is pretty unnecessary, but it could actually come up sometimes. Next up, we got the Baron Squire. He's a legendary, and I think he's like pretty mid, not gonna lie. He's just pretty good with first stats. He has a pretty big high roll potential. After you play an effect from your hand for the first time each turn, you create and play a random effect of the same energy cost. So you could just get the absolute nuts. You could get like the best possible outcome with this card, or you could get a card that actually just destroys your own board, and it's Catastrophe. So if you don't have to go for it, sometimes I wouldn't even risk it, but this card could help you come from behind, could help you pull off a miracle, and it is just good tempo, being a 2/4 for 2. Probably doesn't need any explanation. One of the best 2-drops in the game. Just makes your stuff cost 1 less, makes your opponent's effects cost 1 more. Really good in the current meta because of Kathy with all the spells, and good against Shroud as well, good against a lot of decks. Moving on to the 3-drops, we got 2 copies of Treacherous Scheming. This is a very good control tool. It's a little too slow to run 3 of at the moment for the meta, but yeah, you look into your enemy's hand, you take a card from it, and it goes into your Singularity. And then if that card was a unit, you add a corrupted copy to your hand, which actually comes up as well, because in the control matchups, you don't really care about taking damage from corrupted units, from playing corrupted units. So you can steal some really good cards with this. You do have to remember that if you take anything that's not a unit, it will just go into your Singularity. You don't get a copy in your hand. Just a ton more value, and removing a card from your opponent's hand, especially if they went first, they're probably going to have a lot less cards in their hand, or if they're playing an aggressive deck like Catherine, maybe they've used like all their cards in their hand except for the Triumph of Mars, and they're about to get a whole new hand. So if you could delay that from them quite a bit, it could be game altering. We got 3 Logistics Support Cruisers. You're playing a control deck, it's one of the best cards in the game for just ramping up. So you're gonna want to get to your big stuff sooner. It can draw you cards as well. It's just a really good card. Then we got 3 Erasures. Just pay 3 to banish anything, and pump up your Stewards, and just get those banished units into your Singularity for later on in the game. And like I said before, you do want to pay attention to what you are banishing, because you will get those tools to play with later. But yeah, this card is very solid. I don't think you ever run less than 3. 2 Honored Stewards in the deck. Another solid card. You just banish whatever you want, and the only problem with this one is that when this unit leaves the field, then their unit comes back. If you do banish a token, however, or if you banish a Paragon, then they don't come back, because they don't actually go into your Singularity zone. It's just a little niche interaction. So if you're playing against like an Ogden Core, then you're gonna want to target their tokens or their juggernauts that they get, because they will not come back. If you can target a Paragon, then that's the target that you want as well, because it won't come back. And even if it will come back, it's usually just really good to play because of the loss of tempo that your opponent will suffer. And it's just a tempo shift. It forces your opponent to deal with this 4/4 if they want to get their unit back. We've got the Astel's Glaive in here, even though it just got nerfed recently. I think you probably run this in almost every single deck. Honestly, in most matchups, it's just a good card to drop on 4 if you don't have anything better to do. Next, for the 5 cost, we have 3 copies of Triumph of the Lost. I'm going between 2 and 3 for this, depends on the meta. Copies, and you play the last effect, relic, and non-Paragon unit that your opponent played, and non-token unit as well. In the mirror matchup, in the greedier matchups, the slower matchups, you're gonna get a ton of value off this. You should just get decent value off of this pretty much no matter what. If you get an effect and a unit, it's usually going to add up to at least 5 energy, so you will get your value worth. And yeah, your opponent really has to play around this, or else it's very easy to get punished, because your opponent will want to play a 5 cost on 5 probably, or they'll want to play a 5 cost effect, and you're gonna get some nice value. Try to keep this as long as possible, because if your opponent ever slips up and they don't play around this, then they're probably gonna get screwed over by their own stuff. Then we've got Adira, which I think is one of the best cards in the deck as well. Battle ready, so it attacks when you play it, and it has evasive, so it can attack whatever target it wants. And when it attacks, you look at the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck, you play one, and then you put the others into your singularity. So not only are they gonna not have any of these cards to play with for the rest of the game, but you're going to get to play one of their cards for free, one of the top 3 cards of their deck. Against an aggressive deck, it's maybe not the best, since once again they're playing these lower cost cards, but still you will even find value against those. You'll like always find value with this card, and this card's really good in the mirror matchup as well, to find your opponent's board clear, that I'll go over in a little bit, and just their bigger tools. Like, this card has got to be one of the best cards in this whole parallel. So yeah, totally recommend you play this in your deck. You do have to be careful with this card as well though, because if you are playing in the mirror matchup, if you leave this on the board, if you leave it alive, then your opponent will actually definitely target this to banish it and put it into their singularity, so that they can get it back later. So usually you want to trade this in the turn that you play it, or make sure that you're going to be able to kill it off yourself. Last up for the 5 drops is Wong. You'll get the top 5 cards of your deck, you choose different types and you draw them, and then you buff stuff up. Yeah, I mean, we have basically only units and effects. We have 1 relic in the deck, but he's still just so consistent if you need it. Usually you don't even need the draw, because you're just so greedy anyway, but just in case, he's there for you to get probably an effect and a unit, +2/+2, get you stuff to your hand. Solid. Then we have Salvation, another legendary card. You add a corrupted copy of up to 2 target non-legendary, non-paragon, non-token enemy units, so you do have to be careful when you play this card. You add those 2 to your hand, and the next corrupted unit that you play this turn is free. If that's not good enough already, at the end of your turn, you deal damage to the enemy hero, and you heal yourself equal to the number of friendly corrupted units on the field. So you will automatically have 1 on the field if you have chosen one, or if you have one in your hand already. There are ways to get corrupted units to your hand. The Treacherous Scheming will add a corrupted unit to your hand if you pick the unit, and it does actually come up. So you could purposely, if you have the 6 drop in your hand, you could purposely pick a big unit out of their hand to get a corrupted version for this card when you play it, and then you'll get to play it for free. But yeah, usually you just choose the 2 things on the board, you get to play 1, and that's typically good enough. I mean, this unit's a 4/5 with shielded. It's pretty tanky already, and good for the value game as well, which of course is the object of this deck. And last but not least, we have Demolecularize. It's just a board wipe of this class, and it banishes all units, so everything goes to your singularity. And sometimes you want to do this when you have a decent amount of units out as well, just like in the mirror matchup, to just get a ton of value into your singularity and deny your opponent from getting that value themselves. And you have some ramp tools in the deck. You have some cards like Engine Whisperer to make this cheaper. So you usually can make it to this card, and that's like the whole deal. Like, you want to stay alive, get this down, and then be able to stabilize. 2 things to watch out for though. Of course, with this card, it does cost 8, so you're going to be spending most of your return on this, and then your opponent will be able to rebuild their board the next turn, and maybe you'll have to play another one. So you do have to be careful of what your opponent's going to do the following turn, but also something to keep in mind is that if you have your ship going, your Paragon ability, if you have that out, the 0/6, then you do want to get rid of that before you banish all the units. So if you have this card out right here, if it just came back from your singularity, you want to actually banish this. You want to spend the 1 energy to banish this card before you banish everything on your field, or else you won't be able to get this back. That is the only problem. So yeah, when you have this coming back and forth, like if you've already activated this, usually you want to play this after you have done the 8 cost. It depends on the how the tempo is going on the board, but if you can do that, that is ideal. just because then you would have to wait until 9 energy theoretically to play your Demolecularize because you want to keep this safe. But other than that, the card is crazy and you should totally run 3. Of course, you do run the risk of your opponent playing a Dira and taking this from one of the top 3 cards in your deck, but still extremely solid and necessary. And yeah, that's the deck right there. Pretty much as control-y and greedy as you can get. You could totally get a little more greedy, but in this meta, you can't really afford to. And I don't think you really need to. You kind of have every tool that you would like. And if you need more tools, you could just take them from your opponent, honestly. There are a couple choices in here like gunslingers that are maybe more apt to the current meta that you wouldn't necessarily see in the deck. Like we could totally make it more greedy, but I think for now this is the list that I've been enjoying a lot and it's been doing pretty dang well. I think of a card that is missing in here would be Void Trapper. This is one of the strongest cards I think in the game, but it's just too slow. I just don't think you get enough value off of it at the moment, and I would just rather play 1-drops to just fill out my curve currently. So, I mean, let me know if you're still playing this card right now, and let me know if you like the list. Hope you enjoyed if you try it out, and I'll see ya in the next one. Peace.